Hi, I'm Eva Pilgrim. Thanks for streaming with us. Some dramatic moments in court today in the Sean Diddy Combs trial. The judge threatening on day 17 of testimony to kick the hip-hop mogul out of his own trial for making facial expressions at the jury. We'll have much more on what went down in just a moment. Also today, an alleged victim crying on the stand, a woman going by the name Jane. She is central to the government's case against Combs. He has pleaded not guilty to all allegations. Jane telling the jury in graphic detail about her first alleged freak-off, where she tried to speed things up to get it over. Also today, Brianna Bangolin returning for tough questions from the defense. Cassie Ventura's friend claims Combs dangled her from a 17th-story balcony. The defense at one point saying to her, "You came in here and you lied to this jury," something she denied. The defense claiming Combs could not have dangled her on the day she claims it happened because he was in another state for a Bad Boy reunion. There's a lot to unpack here. Plus, later, we dive into Diddy's empire and break down what could be the endless impact of Diddy's trial. But we begin with ABC News Chief Investigative Correspondent Aaron Kotursky, live outside the federal courthouse here in Manhattan. And Aaron, I want to get straight to that big moment during the lunch break. The judge threatened to kick Sean Combs out of the trial. What happened?
Yeah, he did, Eva, and it seemed to almost come out of nowhere because he was discussing an evidentiary matter with the attorneys and then suddenly switched topics to admonish Combs and say he'd noticed that Sean Combs had been nodding vigorously toward the jury during the testimony of Brianna Bangolin. And he said there is to be absolutely no gesturing of that kind toward the jury box. But he said he's noticed it's happened repeatedly. And he said if it's to happen again, he would consider receiving an instruction from prosecutors, a curative instruction to the jury. And he said even worse, he would consider removing Combs for the remainder of the trial. He said that's not something anyone wants. And he told the defense attorney, the lead defense counsel, Mark Agnifilo, is it going to happen again? And Agnifilo assured him, Eva, that it would not.
Okay, so what was Combs' behavior like after the judge ripped into him?
Oh, it was much different. He kept his gaze squarely focused on the witness box and the bench. But he's been doing this. He's been nodding along when he agrees with testimony, shaking his head when he disagrees with testimony. And for the judge at this particular moment, it just seemed to get too expressive, where it may have crossed a line into what he felt could have been an attempt to intimidate the jury to see things his way.
Brianna Bangolin also wrapped up her testimony today. How did that go?
Well, it may leave prosecutors wondering why they called her in the first place, because they said the whole point of her testimony, Eva, was to show that this is why Cassie Ventura felt coerced into sex, because she witnessed what Sean Combs was capable of, because she saw or heard about her friend, Brianna Bangolin, known as Bana, be hoisted by Combs over a balcony on the 17th floor. And the defense accused her of lying to the jury about it, suggesting it couldn't have happened when she said it did because Combs was in New York for a concert and a Bad Boy reunion tour. And Brianna Bangolin held firm, said she disagreed with the defense assertion that she was lying. And on redirect, prosecutors said, "Do you have any doubt whether this happened?" She said, "I have no doubt." But you wonder if the jury now does.
We also heard from a witness going by the pseudonym Jane. She took the stand today. What did she say?
Jane is important because she is the central figure in the second sex trafficking count that Sean Combs faces, to which he's pleaded not guilty. And Jane talked about Sean Combs flying her to Los Angeles, to Miami, to New York, to Turks and Caicos. And 90% of the time they were together during the course of what she said was a 3-year relationship, they had, she didn't call them freak-offs as Cassie Ventura did, but what she knew as hotel nights. And she said they followed a pattern where the lights were red, the rooms were stocked with baby oil by assistants. Sometimes she said they'd go through 24 bottles a night. And then an escort would enter. She said she was made to wear her hair down, but it was time for sex, though. It had to be in a ponytail, creamy white nails as nail polish. And when the escort would come in, she'd disrobe, begin oral sex, because that's what Sean Combs wanted to see.
Did Combs show any kind of reaction to Jane or what she said on the stand today?
His gaze certainly followed her when she entered the courtroom in a brown skirt suit. I'm not sure she looked at him as she took her place down the aisle and into the witness box, but Sean Combs was looking at her. She told the jury that their relationship lasted right up until the night he was arrested.
Aaron Koturski, thank you so much. We got to break this all down. ABC News legal contributor Brian Buckmeyer is joining us. We first got to talk about that big moment in court. Combs, almost getting kicked out of court. Could you just explain to us the rules of it all for people? Most of us have not spent much time in a courtroom.
Yeah, hopefully you don't have to unless you're an attorney. But the rule is, the overarching rule is, you cannot influence a jury in any way. Even as an attorney, if I'm going out to get lunch or whatever it may be and I see a juror in the hallway, I've got to about face and go the other direction. So having Sean Combs nodding to the jury is a big no-no. And when I say nodding, I'm not talking about like, yeah, this is a cool, no, like nodding and going like, yes, vigorously. And don't forget, if Sean Combs is in court and he's facing straight ahead, looking at the judge or looking at the witness, he actually has to turn almost like this to look at the jury. So it's pretty intentional, not just in his body language of where he's directing himself, but also that nodding of the head. And the judge said, as Aaron Koturski said, wants none of it, because if he does so again, could get kicked out and the trial can continue without him, or a curative instruction.
Okay, so we have to also talk about Brianna Bongolan. She was on the stand again today. The defense, they had some receipts that they brought in. What did these receipts show? Yeah, so absolutely. The big receipt was this photo that Bongolan had given her injuries that she testified to was taken by her girlfriend on the day in which the injuries occurred. That date, September 26th of 2016, I think the time was around 9:45 a.m. However, they came back and they did two things. One, on the day before this alleged incident, Sean Combs is performing in New Jersey with Lil' Kim in this Bad Boy reunion. And there are an actual bill from Trump International Hotel here in New York from September 24th to the 29th, so within that time period. And what happened is, on the actual 26th in the morning, there are receipts of when he's actually having room service sent to him. And so the question became for the witness, can someone be in New York and California at the same time? Her response, theoretically, yes. Okay, well, we also heard from a witness using a pseudonym named Jane. What do we know about her?
So Jane is the ex-girlfriend of Sean Combs. Jane is not her actual name, as you're saying. She's going by a pseudonym. We know that they began dating in 2021, and as Aaron pointed out, the relationship went all the way up until 2024 when he was arrested. From the opening statements, we know that a lot of the allegations mirror that of Cassie, that they dated for a while, the relationship seemed to be positive, and then, while they weren't called freak-offs, they were introduced and the relationship went sour, according to Jane.
What did she say about the start of her relationship with Sean Combs?
I mean, this is, I think, the quote right there. We know that Sean Combs and her were friends through mutual individuals, but then it became romantic. He had a larger-than-life personality, very sweet. They went on a date. I think the first date lasted for 5 days. And for lack of a better term, she was swept off of her feet. And this was a very quick and passionate relationship. She said that the L word, love, was dropped very early on, and they were swept up in the romance.
And then she gave more details about sort of what happened to their relationship. What did she say?
Yeah, so she was saying that first it was love, and then Sean Combs initiated this idea of having these hotel nights, which we also know have heard of them called freak-offs. First, it started off with just one, and she thought that would just be a cool thing to do to bring them closer together. But then she started to say that almost like 90% of the interaction when they had physical relations had these freak-offs. And she couldn't even estimate how many times in writing or in verbally, she told Sean Combs, I don't want to participate in this. And she made it very clear she did not want to, but she felt compelled either through finances or force or fraud, part of that sex trafficking indictment, that she had to participate.
Brian Buckmeyer, thank you so much for being with us. Still ahead, Brian Buckmeyer and Bernardo Villalona are back to break down the defense and the prosecution's strategies. Also coming up, the empire of Sean Diddy Combs and what this trial could mean for the music mogul's legacy. Welcome back to ABC News Live. Another day of testimony in the Sean Diddy Combs trial from Cassie Ventura's close friend, Brianna Bongolan, returning to the stand to the much anticipated testimony from a third alleged victim testifying under the pseudonym Jane. Let's break down the key legal strategies we saw play out in court today. We have Brian Buckmeyer taking on the role of defense and Bernarda Villalona, the prosecution. Bernarda, I'm going to start with you. The defense really trying to poke holes in Breonna's testimony, really questioning the timeline of that alleged 2016 balcony dangling, why she maintained contact with Ventura and Combs after the attack. She told the prosecutor on redirect, quote, "I have no doubt I will never forget him holding me on that balcony." Was she an effective witness for them?
So at some point, I was concerned for the prosecution because you're like, wait, hold up. When the defense brought the receipts in the sense of showing the messages and the mega data of when that actual text message was actually sent, then it made her testimony just completely fall apart. However, as a prosecutor, and I think even as a defense attorney, when you're dealing with times and dates of things that happened so long ago, it's very difficult for a witness to remember that. The most important thing is, do you remember the big ticket items? Do you remember the material facts? But I will say this. The prosecutor rebounded from all of that when they were able to bring in a text message that had the date,
in on Brian's face
the
right
text
now.
message, the receipt from that time from 2016, where it says Cassie is texting, I think, KK and saying like, look, I had enough. Look, he dangled her off the railing. That's a 2016 text. At that time, there was no civil lawsuit. At that time, there was no criminal prosecution. Where in the mind they'll be like, let me send this text because you know what? In the future, ding, 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 there may be a criminal case, or ding, 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 I may file a civil lawsuit. So I think because that text message was able to be brought into evidence, that changed the narrative when it came to Ms. Bonner.
Yeah, so no, it didn't change it in that sense at all because the receipts were so damaging because she said on her own, she does not have an independent knowledge of this event, correct? Mm-hmm. They also showed not just, I wouldn't get to the timeline as yet, one time she has a neck brace and then a week later she's partying and she doesn't have the neck brace. That sounds like you're out for money from the get-go. And you think that this text message cures it? No, because she doesn't know when this happened. You look at the metadata, she says firmly, this photo was taken on the same day. They show that this happens in California. Sean Combs is performing with Little Kim the night before. He's ordering room service on the same time. And when asked the question, can a person be in California and New York at the same time? Theoretically, yes. If this text message does anything, it shows that Cassie and her were scheming because the metadata doesn't lie and where he's performing doesn't lie. So now it seems like the defense have been trying to argue this entire time. They've been working on this story for quite some time.
Since 2016, they've been working on the story.
Okay, let's bring in this text message because if you weren't in court, you didn't get to see all of this play out. There was a text message extracted from a cell phone seized from Combs' one-time chief of staff, Christina Coram, and in the message, Cassie wrote, quote, "He came into my house and my friends were here. They woke me up because he was ringing the bell like crazy." The message continued. "He went on Abana and choked her and then dangled her feet off the balcony."
This is the one question. Yes or no, was Sean Combs performing in the Bad Boy reunion between September 24th to the 29th? This is sentence.
The dates are wrong. The dates are wrong, but still,
so when did it happen
it's
then?
The material. It's the dates. We're talking about a few days. What's not this?
She texted on the 30th.
This text message, but this text message here, the core of it is that it happened. The question is, did Sean Combs dangle her from the balcony? The answer is yes.
In
I don't
2016?
care what date it actually happened. Do you have the corroboration that it happened?
But you don't.
Look, I agree with you. The prosecution should have never called her. She is not worth the squeeze. I think the prosecution failed in determining the pros and cons of her testifying. I would not have called her if I were the prosecutor because that type of testimony now kind of taints the testimony of other witnesses because it's like, how hard are you willing to go with this type of witness? You may have done it with the other witnesses.
It also taints Cassie because of this text message and the fact that they're so close. Now you can say that if Cassie is willing to put this incident in her own civil lawsuit and got it wrong, according to this person, and then this person seems to get it wrong as well, how many times can you get a story wrong before you start thinking, is the story made up?
But either way, in terms of the dangling off the balcony, I really don't care about that because again, we're here for the racketeering conspiracy. We're here for the sex trafficking and the transportation to engage in prostitution. Not about really the dangling. That was there for the coercion part. We move on from that. Let's focus on
tell them what false.
Let's talk about Jane because we're going to run out of time and we don't have to talk about anything else, right? Jane was on the stand today.
Yes.
Her testimony, effective?
Well, as of now, it's direct examination. So for the prosecution, direct examination better be effective, right? It better go your way because you control the direct examination. So Maureen Comey is doing an excellent job in the sense of laying the story of how they first met. How was the relationship? You know, how much did he provide for you? And were you working? How much money were you making? And how did he propose this money? And how did he propose the drugs that he was giving to you? And ultimately, when did these hotel nights begin and whose idea was and how often
And Brian, I have to ask you about the judge situation that happened today with Combs almost getting thrown out of the courtroom. Can a defense attorney really keep their client in line? I mean,
not that you should, when we were probably children and you were sitting down and you're doing something your mother didn't want you to do, you might get a little pinch on the side.
Is the defense attorney going to pinch?
Do attorneys sometimes be like, you better stop that right
give
now.
Me that look,
Yeah, so do I give that daddy look that my son doesn't like to my clients when they're doing something foolish? Yeah. Do I give him a little...
Yeah.
And I think that might happen.
But you know the problem and why the judge is upset, because Sean Combs, because I'm in the main courtroom, and Sean Combs is actively giving those nods. So you are communicating, giving them testimony as to where you stand to that jury when you're not on the witness stand to give that information. So he doesn't want the jury getting anything, gleaming anything from Sean Combs' head now, like, yeah, that's true. Oh, no, she's lying.
And
get on the stand if you want to say that.
And see what you're doing? Like that subtle head nod? That's not what he's doing. He's not doing
he's doing like that.
He's not doing this.
Yeah,
he's like,
there's some active
it's big.
That's a good picture that we all just witnessed. Brian Buckfire, Bernardo Villalona, thank you both for being here with us. Coming up, inside Diddy's empire and the impact this trial could have on the music industry. Also ahead, why 50 Cent is one of the top searches online when it comes to the trial of Sean Diddy Combs. Stay with us. Welcome back. We're at about the halfway point in the trial against Sean Combs as the former hip-hop mogul faces allegations of sex trafficking and racketeering conspiracy, charges he's denied. One of the biggest questions people keep asking online is how much is Diddy worth? While we don't know the exact answer to that question, here to talk about the vast impact of Combs' empire over the decades is Justin Tinsley, senior culture reporter for ESPN's Andscape. Justin, thank you so much for joining us. When you think of Combs and his massive rise to success in the 90s, how did he do it all?
I mean, you can't talk, if we talk about the 1990s and it's this massive decade of cultural shifts, Combs is an architect of that. He knew what sounded good. He knew what looked good. He knew what people wanted to hear. And he manifested that in so many of the artists that he worked with, from Jodeci to Mary J. Blige to Biggie Smalls, Usher, Faith Evans, Total Mace, even outside of music in media empires like Making the Band and philanthropy and entrepreneurship. He had his fingertips on the pulse of so many important realms in terms of culture that it's honestly endless.
Some controversy, some would say, has always followed him, but has that ever really impacted his vast businesses?
Not until, I guess you could say, until Cassie's lawsuit came out in November 2023 rather. But as you said, there was this black cloud that's really followed him from the start of his career. You can go to the 1991 City College incident, the 95 Source Awards, Suge Knight's close friend being murdered in the parking lot of an Atlanta nightclub, allegedly by Diddy's bodyguard, the East Coast West Coast war, Tupac and Biggie's murder, and even the Club New York shooting that had Sean in jail for a decade. And then there was always the stereotype that he financially shorted his artists. But up until that lawsuit, it felt like he would never be held accountable for that black cloud that was around him. And now that black cloud is pretty much undeniable, and even he can't escape that.
His image after this, guilty or not guilty, however it does shake out, what does that look like for him?
You know, for so long, Diddy was known as this connoisseur of cool. Like, you wanted to go to his parties, you wanted to be around him, you wanted to use his products. And for so long, Diddy was his best client. Diddy knew how to market himself. And in 2014, he had this song called I Want the Love. Those weren't just lyrics. that public adoration really fueled him. And now with the details that are emerging in this case, and as you guilty or not, he can never go back to being Diddy again.
I'm curious, how might the trial impact other people's legacies, like the Notorious B.I.G.?
You know, that's a really good question, because while I don't think that's going to impact people from listening to Biggie's music or Jodeci's music or Mary J. Blige or even Usher, it is a really interesting wrinkle and addition to their story because they're so closely associated with him. I think back to something that the late Valletta Wallace said last year, that she wanted to slap the hell out of him because she knew what his legacy meant for her sons.
I know you've thought a lot about this case, and I saw somewhere that you say this makes you think of a famous quote from the Batman movie, The Dark Knight. I want to play it for everyone. Take a listen.
You either die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain.
Why is it that quote that comes to mind?
I think back to the quote-unquote East Coast, West Coast war and the four principal figures in that: Suge Knight, Diddy, Tupac, and Biggie. Obviously, Tupac and Biggie died young, but they saw their legacies achieve this rare sense of immortality, whereas Suge and Diddy lived in the literal sense, but they lived long enough to see their egos and their vulnerabilities eventually swallow them whole. And I think that when you look back on that pivotal point in American pop culture history, no one actually survived that moment. And that makes that saga, that makes that point of hip hop history that much more tragic, because there was so much talent involved, but there's so much tragedy around it.
Justin Tinsley, thank you so much for being with us. The public fascination with the Sean Combs trial only continues to grow. Let's take a look at some of today's top online searches surrounding this case. It ranges from whether 50 Cent is making a Diddy documentary to questions about when the defense will bring in witnesses. ABC News contributor Kelly Carter joins us now from Los Angeles. She covers entertainment and pop culture for us. All right, Kelly, let's talk about the thing that I kind of feel like everyone's talking about. Is 50 Cent making a Diddy documentary? 50 Cent, he continues to get the attention here.
Yes, he does. And yes, he is. You know, he announced about a week after Sean Combs' arrest in September of last year that he was going to be making this documentary and that it's going for on Netflix. It's going to stream on Netflix. He also said back in December that it was getting a little bit more challenging to make it because of the mounting accusations that were still coming in the aftermath of that initial arrest, but that he wanted this to be a complex exploration, essentially, of this cultural iconic figure.
Another search people want to know about: is there a Diddy mugshot?
Yeah, you know what? I think that's happening because there's this AI version of a mugshot that's circulating, but there isn't. What we do know is we've seen this video footage of the actual arrest in Midtown Manhattan back in September, but no mugshot. So if you're seeing a mugshot, it is AI generated.
People are also looking up Diddy prison conditions.
Yeah, you know, I feel like that's coming about because every time we hear someone talk about the luxurious lifestyle that he was living, you know, today in court we heard about, you know, vacations on a yacht and a movie theater inside a mansion. People want to really see what the contrast is like. And the truth is that this is a very grim, you know, holding cell for him. So it's not what he was used to.
The prosecution's case seems to be reaching its end, coming soon. There's a lot of interest now about when is the defense bringing witnesses.
Yeah, I think people want to know who is on that defense witness list. Is it just going to be former Bad Boy employees, or will it be artists that we know? Are there going to be some industry people that will be taking the stand in defense of Sean Combs? It remains to be seen, but that's what everyone wants to know right now.
Kelly Carter, thank you as always.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us. We'll be back with new episodes every day of the trial. The show streams right here on ABC News Live, Disney Plus, and Hulu, weekdays at 5:30 p.m. Eastern and Pacific. For even more on the Diddy trial, make sure to follow our podcast, Bad Rap, the case against Diddy, hosted by our very own Brian Buckmeyer on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. I'm Eva Pilgrim in New York. Have a good rest of your day.